Okay, good. Okay, well, welcome. Welcome, everyone. This is another meeting of PennLive's editorial board. And today we are going to talk about a topic that is most important, and that is being aware about the issues involved with sexual assault and crimes like that. And we are just delighted to have with us today two people who are pretty much experts in this field, and they're also going to give us some information about April being the time period that people are setting aside to make people more aware of the issues involved in sexual violence. So with that, I do see I have here Yolanda Edrington, and she is with Respect Together, along with Gabriella Romeo. Both of them are here to share information with us. And so let me first turn it over to Yolanda, and then you can let us know how it goes. Just lay out what the issues are for us.
Yeah, so just a quick introduction. So, like Joyce said, I'm Yolanda Edrington. I'm the CEO over here at Respect Together. I've been here a little over 8 years, and uh, just a tiny bit over a year in this role. We are soon to celebrate our 50th anniversary. But before we jump into that, just wanted to give a groundwork of who Respect Together is. So, Respect Together, again, has existed for almost 50 years. August 4th is the exact date. We have two divisions. Our state division is what most people are aware of, which is PCAR, Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect. And that's where we started out as a coalition for the 50 years. And then our national arm is the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. Two parts of the division, the state part, which is PCAR, has the audience of our residents here in Pennsylvania, but also our rape crisis centers across Pennsylvania, which there's 48 rape crisis centers in the 67 counties. And the audience for our national arm are the other coalitions across the U.S., health departments, organizations like OVW, which is Office on Violence Against Women. I always forget what the acronym stands for, and CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, are some of our big target audience for the national arm. And then I'll give time for Gabriella to introduce herself, and we'll jump right into what we do here.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hello, I'm Gabriella Romeo. I am the Public Policy Director at the state division, so the Pennsylvania Coalition to Advance Respect, the division of Respect Together. And the way I like to describe my role here, I've been here for about 2 years, and I describe it as that branch, that liaison between our state coalition, our rape crisis centers, and Pennsylvania leadership, our state general assembly, other forms of elected officials and leadership within our community, and work towards investing in policies and procedures and legislation that is supportive of the work that we show up to do every day.
Great.
And, go ahead.
I know it said great. The opening question I really just want to throw out at you, and I know you're going to give us a lot of foundation, but in this environment we're in, politically and otherwise, I do wonder if that is how that's impacting your work to try to make people aware of this issue.
Yeah, and our goal, our vision here is to eliminate all forms of sexual violence, harassment, and assault across period for all populations. So when I say all population, that's all populations, and that ties right into our current administrative climate. If we're separating what all means, or separating that this isn't what we do. If we're saying, we're going to I'm just going to say bluntly, if we're going to take out DEI, that's not including everybody in their wholeness of who they are, and our work that we do to prevent and advocate for survivors is for everyone, whether that's you identify as Black, you identify as white, LGBTQ+. Like, we are saying exactly who we represent, and that is everyone in their whole totality of who the person is. And that does cause it's strenuous. It can cause some angst in the space that we are in when we're talking about funding, which is one of the things that we wanted to talk about, is the funding that comes along with the work when we're working to provide community care, community health, and this is part of that space that we play, preventing sexual violence. And April gives us an opportunity to bring our topic up at a broader space with Sexual Assault Awareness Month happening in April. And a lot of folks and communities are used to that month. So we try to take really a lot of advantage leading up to April and in April to build this awareness so people understand what it means when we say we represent everyone, and how we work with our community partners, whether that's another organization, whether it's a church, no matter the denomination, that we are here for all survivors, no matter how you vote, what side of the coin that you're on. We are literally here for every survivor and to prevent sexual harassment or assault happening to anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good to know, because that's one of the things. And are any of your funding or anything being threatened in with all of the federal cuts that are coming down?
And I'll lean in on Volca, and Gabriella should go ahead and take us into that space. But I like to give a actual example of what is happening here in Pennsylvania. So altogether, Pennsylvania will take a 10% cut in Volca funding, and that's the Victim of Crime Act. It's 5% and then another 5%. And how that affects us in real life, I'm going to talk about the YWCA in Lancaster. They had a housing room specifically for trafficking victims. Because of that cut, that has gone away because they can't fund it. So I want to use this opportunity to talk about real things that are happening here within our state and across the U.S., but concentrating on Pennsylvania is what happens when folks connecting that decision with a real life human being that we are now not able to service in the full totality of what they need. And then Gabriella can talk more about even in bigger cuts.
Yeah, I think so. When we're looking at our funding as a whole, like, yes, we have federal streams, we have state funding streams, right? And I kind of view them, they're all puzzle pieces that come together to support the work across the state. And each one almost have an equal importance, no matter if it's you get millions of dollars from one source and maybe a few thousand from another. They're all coming in to support this work. And I think what's really important in this space is to remind folks that our state legislature has invested in this before, and we get funding from within the state budget, housed under the Department of Human Services, and that funding comes down to our state division, to Respect Together, to help fund our rape crisis centers across the state. And so what we've seen as a challenge in that funding has not had a meaningful increase in about 5 years. So we've had some small increases along the way. So it's not keeping up with inflation and cost of living and what it costs to keep a human trafficking space open for a survivor when needed, what it requires to make sure that your staff can show up and be fully supported in their space. And so we are asking for a raise in our state funding. We're asking for an $8 million increase in this line item in the state budget, and reminding that our folks that are in this space, our elected officials, our state legislators, that you've already invested in this, and we're asking you to keep up with it. We're asking you to meet the need where it sits now. And the people that we serve are the same people that they serve, right? Our constituents are the same. And we want to make sure that those resources exist not just exist when somebody needs them, but are meaningful and impactful and capable of whatever that survivor needs when they come to us for the help.
Okay, I see Vinny has her hand up right now, but after Vinny goes through, I'd like for you guys to really just fundamentally talk about how you carry out your mission. What are those, because you mentioned working with churches, and so just to talk a little bit what do you do and how do you do it? Go ahead, Vinny, though. Let's take your question.
Thanks, Joyce. And that's one of my questions as well. What services do you actually provide? And then my other thought was that you said you were here for 50 years in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And you've been funded by our legislators for that long?
Listen, I actually do not recall the year that we started to receive funding from our state legislature. I'd have to follow up on that. Mm-hmm. But for I'd have to follow up to get the exact number of how long.
My point is that they must know you, and they must know the good reputation you have to be funded for that long. I wish, I mean, I never heard of this group, and so it's important to know about. Also, I'm thinking about, I have a disability. I use a wheelchair, and there are women that are vulnerable and they can't escape because there's no transportation, there's no accessible housing to support them temporarily. So I'm just wondering how you're going to deal with that and provide for people with disabilities.
I'll go ahead and jump right in to answer the one of the easier questions. The funding started in 1978 because I made sure to have our history up because I would not remember all of that. So funding started in 1978. It's now the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. That's where the first stream of funding came through. So yeah, like you said, Vinny, we have and continue to be supported through financially through these different spaces and things like that. And what we're asking for is the continuation and an increase to meet the times that we are in. And with our services that we're providing, like on our state part of our division, which is PCAR, where we started out at as our coalition, we provide direct service for our legal assistance project. And then also our disasters relief. So if there's a survivor, a victim of sexual violence, and there's like a natural disaster like flooding or something like that, and they're needing financial resources, we provide direct funding for that. Like here's an actual check that goes towards the needs that you have, and it's a very, very easy application, just a couple lines stating what it is, and it goes through the coalition or the rape crisis center that you are connecting with us through. So those are some of the real tangible things, and then providing resources and connection for human trafficking, and then also working with our partners for people to understand about housing and those who have disabilities with the different ranges of it, whether it's mobility, vision, all of these different things, on how that also is a barrier in services, a barrier in housing, and not connecting. If you're not working in this space, you don't easily connect with it. Or if you're not a person living with a disability, you don't easily connect with what that barrier may look like for you when you're going out to get services. And that's one of our roles, is helping our like housing developers when they're talking about low income housing or what does that mean in true detail. What does that mean around accessibility for housing? And if you're saying you're going to have accessible housing for crime victims, are you including sexual violence? Because people don't always see that as like a need of housing. They might really connect with it with domestic violence, but they're not connecting with it for folks that are experiencing sexual violence, because it happens from partner to the person, and from, whether it's a spouse or a partner, and they can't leave because of monetary or don't have housing connected. But like building awareness wrapped around what is needed in housing, and then even how it's needed across medical needs, on what insurance providers need to know, what hospital staff need to know around providing services for those who have experienced this type of crime, this type of assault, that they need to know this awareness part around it. Because, and I'll use this as a very small example of even like having a trauma-informed chair. We've all been to the dentist's office, and they get pretty close because that's the nature of their work. But in some of the newer chairs have more space, so you're not getting as close. So that's being accessible, like having an accessible space for somebody to come into, so it's not re-traumatizing, re-triggering for someone. But those are even that small, or even in spaces you're interviewing somebody, that it shouldn't be stale, it shouldn't be this, it shouldn't be like complete white walls, no, none of that. If you're looking to connect with someone, sounds small, but if you're a person that's coming in after experiencing of being harmed, these are the things that you need to be able to connect and get the services. And those are may seem random or small to other people, but this is really important. And that's a space that we even play with our training, coming in and helping people to develop these resources in these spaces that are more conducive to the person that's coming in, and letting them know, like, when we talk about domestic violence, that's not exactly talking about sexual violence. They're two different things. When domestic violence gets an increase, and I just want to say it out loud because sometimes we confuse the two. When domestic violence line item gets an increase in budget, in monies, that doesn't mean that sexual violence is getting an increase in their monies. That's not the same. Those are two different things. Housing that may be available for domestic violence survivors is not the same housing that's available for sexual violence survivors unless it's specifically stated. So to say those things out loud, and that's some of the advocacy that we do to let people understand or help people understand the difference, how we work together, yes, as partners, but there is a difference and there's monies that's attached to that difference. And folks that are survivors are not being able to access those things because people lack the awareness.
Thank you so much.
And if I could,
yes, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would love to add a little more detail about some of the services that our rape crisis centers provide. So as Yolanda mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we have 48 centers serving all 67 counties across the Commonwealth. So some centers are serving a single county, some might serve more than one county. And so they're providing services not only to survivors themselves, but also loved ones, family members, so it's a broad range of folks that we serve. Also children that have experienced sexual violence, adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and there's a wide range of services. So everything from therapy and counseling for survivors, legal advocacy. Maybe they're going to court for a protection order and they want someone there that can help support them in that process, explain to them. And it's not an attorney, it's an advocate that's explaining to them what's going to happen today. Do you need someone to talk to, as hold your hand as we sit here in court? If a survivor presents at a hospital for a forensic exam after they've been assaulted, the goal is to make sure that an advocate is called. They have that right in our law, their Victim Bill of Rights in Pennsylvania. They have the right for an advocate to be present. If they don't want one, that's okay. But if they do, we want to make sure that that phone call is made to a rape crisis center, because a rape crisis center will show up. They're on call 24/7 to get a phone call. Does not matter what time of day. And that whether it's a volunteer, some centers have volunteers, but most of them it's their staff, and they answer that phone call and they show up to the hospital for these folks and explain their rights to them. What will happen after a forensic exam is one, to assess the health and the needs of a patient at the time, but also to collect evidence and to move forward possibly with the legal process. And so making sure that individual knows what will happen to my sexual assault evidence kit after it's collected. We're really excited because a piece of legislation just passed in October to establish a statewide rape kit tracking system in Pennsylvania. So we now join the majority. There's over 35 states and Washington, D.C. that have a kit tracking system. And to kind of break that down into simple terms, it's a way for folks to, whether it's an advocate, a survivor, law enforcement, healthcare, to know where a kit is in the process of being tested. So it can break it down simply. So if it's at the hospital, what does that mean? Did law enforcement collect it? What does that mean? And that really helps streamline a process. It can help with backlogs of rape kits and also help us collect data and then use that data moving forward to help better support survivors.
Well, thank you. I do think we still need to, because you guys are so involved with this and it's your everyday thing. I do think we still need a little more foundation. So the point of contact, it sounds like you're dealing not only with victims, but you're dealing with support people who are helping the victims. So let's start at the beginning. When there is a crime, does that victim report it to the police, and do the police tell the victim to contact you or to contact a crisis center? Do they sometimes just go directly to you first and ask for help? What do I tell us how and is Respect Together actually running rape crisis centers?
No. So so we have Respect Together and we have our coalition, and we're a flow through of funds, we're a flow through of support, resources, trainings, all those different things to support the work of the rape crisis centers. Each rape crisis center is their own standalone. So they're their own standalone. They're representing the counties that they're in and providing support. I'm very happy that you asked that question, because I don't want people to think that we are running the rape crisis centers. They are their own standalone. We are here for support. 10 rape crisis centers created us, came together to create us back in 75, but we do not run those rape crisis centers. They have their own leadership. And we work in unison together. So even our board, 6 seats of our board will always be the representatives of rape crisis centers. So we have even internal representation of rape crisis centers. Me, I'm a former staff of a rape crisis center. So we have the influx to make sure that we really do keep connected to boots on the ground, and making sure that we don't lose that connection of what is really needed every single day. So that's ways that we are able to do that. And then, so I started out with our direct services and at Respect Together through the coalition or the national, and then Gabby led us into what is provided at the rape crisis centers and how we work together. So I want to make sure that we are pretty good on that part. And our part is providing that awareness in the trainings, even like with corporations around having safer, healthier work environments, preventing sexual harassment, things like that. So that's really a lot of the things that we do in the support space. And when you talk about for a victim of sexual assault, it's both and. So a victim of sexual assault may not call the police. Law enforcement may not be involved, and they are. Our goal in rape crisis centers, and also our goal is to make sure that people know where they can go. So when they call the hotline, and it directs you to your local rape crisis center that's connected to you. That's in Pennsylvania, and across the United States is close to 2,000 rape crisis centers. So that you're being connected to exactly where you're at, and then being able to say what your needs are, what your desires are in that time, that moment right then and there. It may change in a year or even, 10 minutes. You might have started off and said you didn't want to call the police. And then maybe a year later, you might want to report it. And that also connects to what Gabby was talking about with the rape kits. Might be able, you know what, I'm going to have this collected, but I actually don't want to contact the police. These are all the choices that are of the survivors, not of ours. But it's our role to make sure that they understand what their rights are and how we can support them in the space that they are in, and make sure that they have the resources for them. So that's really our largest role, is to make sure that we are supporting victims of assault, also working to prevent it, but also our primary is to support the survivor where they are at and how they desire.
Okay, so the person will report to police or to a rape crisis center, and you, the rape crisis center, will then reach out to Respect for support. Is that your relationship with the rape crisis center?
In a
You
way,
provide support for them?
yeah. So one of my favorite phrases is we help the helpers. So we make sure that they have all the resources and assistance, funding, information, whatever it is, to help survivors in their community, right? So we are that backbone to make sure that these rape crisis centers exist in their communities, have all of the resources, funding, everything necessary. So when a survivor does ask for help, they're there ready, open arms. We're here to help you and provide you with whatever you're looking for.
So you're in constant dialogue with the rape crisis centers so that you can help them fill any gaps that they may need to be able to function effectively. And you also have an education piece, it seems like. So do you reach out to corporations or to schools or whatever, or do they come to you? How does that work?
Again, it's a both and. So sometimes they reach out to us or refer to us, and then vice versa, we'll reach out to them to support the needs that they have. Or, somebody being trouble in the news and they're like, oh, I learned about you, so I'm connecting you. So what services can you have around accountability? How do we create this space? And if it's better for a rape crisis center to provide the service, then we're going to connect them to that rape crisis center and not to us if we're not the appropriate fit for it. So it's a constant teamwork of working together to be able to support what the community needs. And, whether that's an organization in the community or an individual in the community, that's a consistent back and forth with the rape crisis centers and coalition.
Okay, so you guys actually have, I would say, trainers then, or people that go out and speak and connect. Yes. Okay, very good. So I think I got a pretty good understanding on two of the. Is there any other service or support that you're providing that we're missing here?
So we talked about our trainings, our resources, the actual financial part, legal assistance.
Talk right there about finance. That's what I don't understand. So you talked about actually giving checks to. So how does that work? What is that?
So we do a year, all throughout the year, campaign to be able to get fundraising in for our disaster relief funds. to keep that upland. So look, funds. And so when if something is happening, whether it's a hurricane or something like that is happening within the community, the fires, for example, when that was happening, we reached right out to the coalition in California. It's like, hey, don't forget we have this funding here. If someone is coming to you, please fill out this short form so that we can send funding back out to you. Because this is one of our largest things that we try to raise money for all the way throughout the year, so that we can just put the money right back out into the community. Like, this is what is needed, whether the person needs clothing, housing, and all those different things when a disaster happens. So that's one of the ways that we're able to help too.
So this would be someone who's recently experienced sexual assault and needs
No.
immediate help, or they experienced it a year ago or 20
Yep.
years ago.
Yep. It doesn't have to be today, or it could have been 20 years ago. They are in need. They're a survivor of sexual assault, and they have connected with their rape crisis center or their coalition in their state. And so usually as soon as we hear about it, we connect our contact and say, like, hey, don't forget these resources are here. How can we be of assistance? What else is needed so that we can start to send out funds?
Okay, that's interesting. I'm assuming though that there has to be, as you say, they have to have previously connected and reported the rape, right, or reported the sexual assault, right?
So I think it's also important to distinguish between reporting and disclosing. So
Okay.
I think often when we think of reporting a sexual assault, we think of someone calling the police and reporting a crime. But that it's not as common as we think for folks to report this as a crime. It's more common for an individual to disclose to someone they trust, or a hotline maybe, that this happened to me. I had this. I was sexually assaulted, and they might not actually be looking to go down the road of prosecuting a crime, but just wanting to share what happened, ask for help, want someone else to know what happened. And I think that leads into understanding that the role for an advocate is meeting a survivor where they're at, and also understanding that disclosure could happen in a lot of ways. I think even, for example, this conversation, when someone else reads about this, sees this, hears this, it might spark disclosure. It might bring something up within them that they now know that these services exist and they didn't know. And that's what's so important about having conversations like this, is so we can get our this word out to the general public that we are here whenever you need us.
That's very interesting. Good. That's good to know. And you're right. A lot of people will read this and say, I didn't know that I could get help. And so, but here's one thing that also I'm still kind of confused. What percentage of your work is involving human trafficking, and what percentage perhaps is just women who are dealing with this? And just wonder how big of an issue is the human trafficking side?
I think human trafficking is definitely something, human trafficking services is something that some of our centers, depending upon where they're located, might have a more fleshed out response to it. Others, but it's growing. It is absolutely growing, providing those services. And I think what's important, I don't have a percentage number off the top of my head, but what I think is important is making sure that staff at rape crisis centers have the tools to help identify if somebody is being trafficked, because it's highly unlikely that someone will come in and say, I'm a survivor, I'm a victim of trafficking. They might not realize that's what's happening to them, but they might say, this is what's going on. And we want to make sure advocates are able to look at those signs and recognize, oh, this person might be trafficked, and that will pivot how they help that person. And it's important to know that most services for trafficking tend to be a long-term type of service versus a short-term service. So what's that immediate need is for a survivor when they first ask for help, versus what that need might be 3-4 months, even 2 weeks down the road.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that with so that's specifically with our rape crisis centers, and even there's a space, and I will always come back to there's a role to play for many of us, and that we have to have a better awareness of what that role is. And one of the projects that we are working on with our national division is an organization called ICF, and that is built for healthcare professionals. So that also, like, we're coming up with a resource that's easier for them to be able to relate to is when you see these signs, where again, where many people might be really familiar with the signs, or even have resources for certain trainings for domestic violence, where sexual violence is quite different. And so, like, the research that we're working on is to be able to help people become aware of when we're talking about sexual violence. Here's the awareness piece. Here's the information that you want to become familiar with and be able to ask. And many health providers already have some of this information, but want to bring it up to date and be able to tap into it on a regular basis, so that we are able to folks know that these resources are here. And particularly with trafficking, is that you can be able to intervene in a safe way. If you're a health professional, if you're an advocate, if you're a friend, a family member, or different things, or a school, like, how do you intervene in that way? And so we may not have the full percentage, because this is something that, again, we don't have all the numbers, because people don't quote unquote report or even know that they have an advocate to be able to disclose that this is happening to them, just like other forms of sexual violence. So to have the full percentage, right now we don't have that, and it'll be even hard to have as a whole.
Right. And I'm assuming you go into schools to talk to young people about this issue. Is that correct? It's part of your job also going into the high schools and universities?
Yes, we do have our trainers, our coordinators, like we have our child advocacy person that coordinator, I believe she's a coordinator, that
Mm-hmm.
goes into these different spaces. But both and working with rape crisis centers that are right here already connected to the community that they serve, may be the best space for that school to tap into, because that is a resource that's right here, and not always the coalition, but the rape crisis center is the one for them to tap into, because it's right here in community connection. And then we absolutely do go out and have talks with universities to talk about sexual assault awareness, how that connection to Title IX, building in other awareness pieces within the university, also for them to know who they can tap into. Many times that rape crisis center is right there in the neighborhood and people don't know it, and what it means to tap into a rape crisis center.
Okay. Well, this is certainly interesting. I'm assuming there are some things, some key things that you want people to walk away understanding in April, at least to have this
Yeah.
April awareness. There are simple things that you want people to know. Why don't you throw that at us? I'm hoping it's no more than 5 things you need to
Oh,
know or something.
yeah, the largest thing around Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is every April, that campaign takes you all the way throughout the year, is understanding that in our tagline this year is "Together we act, united we change," is that every single person has a role to play in preventing a sexual assault, and also of supporting of survivors, whether somebody disclosed to you yesterday. But for you to be able to create the environment where it's a healthy, safe space for somebody to be able to come and talk to you, and it's not accusatory when they do, and that you have the resource, the knowledge to be able to tell them, hey, connect here. I may not be the person, but please connect here, is one of our largest things. And that awareness campaign happens all the way throughout April, and is different resources and things that go along with it, so that people can connect with the Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And then we keep talking about our 50th anniversary, because not only is it an event on April 30th at the Hershey Country Country Club. It's about celebrating the wins that have happened throughout these 50 years, but also taking that pause to celebrate the wins, and then also taking the time to talk about where we are going and how we're going to do that as a collective, and the support that is needed in our communities. And that's advocate support, survivor support, financial support that needs to come from the community. So that's the space that's there. And then we also have our new PSA that talks about these resources and services that's available, that have just been green lighted yesterday, all of the new ones that are coming out. So we're hoping to really build upon our social media and these other outlets, so that people know that you do have help right here next to you.
I could add just a few things that connect with Sam as well. All of the rape crisis centers across the state host events within their counties, within their communities, to support Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so the color for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is teal. And so if you see something in your community that's like, hey, what's that teal? What's going on? Ask questions. Be inquisitive. Learn about the resources in your community. And then 2 important days in April that are tied to Sexual Assault Awareness Month. April 1st is Wear Teal Day. And so we encourage folks in all spaces, if you have something teal, put it on that day. And don't be afraid to tell someone why. And then tied to our 50th anniversary event, April 30th is also what's known as Denim Day, which stems from a court case in Italy. There was a woman who was sexually assaulted, and the court essentially ruled that because she was wearing tight jeans that would have been hard to get off, it couldn't have happened. And in solidarity, later the next day or the following week, women members of that system wore denim to support that survivor. And so we're tying that, we're purposely hosting our 50th anniversary event on that day. And encouraging folks, wear denim, wear jeans, and educate folks on what is Denim Day, how does it tie to our mission, how does it tie to our work. And I think what's really special about that is that it's a worldwide thing that's crossed borders. It's not just something we do here in Pennsylvania in the United States.
So it's across the world that this is happening.
Yeah, because it started in Italy with a court case in Italy, and we bring it here. And so those are really tangible, simple ways for folks to begin engagement in this space and in this community and in this movement. If you're not sure where to start, that's a really great place to start.
Well, you guys have shared with us that the human trafficking is increasing, and clearly there's still much more work to be done to protect women and to protect anyone, because it's not just women who are sexual assault victims. Men can be sexual assault victims as well. But also, I think you do have a lot to celebrate, because these kinds of conversations were not held 50 years ago. I'm pretty sure, right? This is a whole new understanding that the community needs to know about. We need to talk about it. We all, as you said, Yolanda, we all have a role to play. We all have. It's not just the police, or it's not just but each one of us has to create, I guess, talk about an environment. We have to be willing to hear the victims, or how, when you say each one of us has a role, what is that role?
I'll give a prime example based off of what Vinny was talking about earlier. Housing. If you are in a housing space, you're a developer, you're this, you're that, and we're talking about accessibility, ask the question, does this also include this? And if you are the person that's funding it, make sure that it does. That's if you are there, that's your table. Now let's make sure that we are including it in different spaces. It's just like our different DEI efforts, our language access. It is in every single grant that we write. It becomes regular practice, regular vocabulary if we do it in every space, or just ask about it. Doesn't have to be, very forceful. We just want to ask, do you mean this or do you mean that? But I think housing is one of the ways for us to connect across everywhere, and particularly across PA. In our Harrisburg area, with so much housing development that's going on in a very great way, but making sure that we are talking about the accessibility piece and how it connects to survivors.
I wonder, how does the accessibility, what a survivor needs specially in a house?
So, and all survivors are what the needs are will be different, but when we're talking about safer and healthier spaces, that's what we're talking about, where we're not always talking about physical disability or something like that. It can be making sure services are provided. Even when you're talking about environmental, like I remember going to a hotel giving reviews on theirs, because of how the circle on the floor went, you couldn't see somebody coming. So that means putting up a mirror if you're unable to redo the building. So how are you making this accessible and safer and healthier for your community that comes in? That's an environmental change, like in that space. So sometimes it may be as simple as that, as someone coming in, just like you want an automatic door. I want to be able to see the people coming towards me too. And I'm just thinking of historical buildings. So that's one of the prime examples when we're talking about creating healthier and safer environments around accessibility.
Very good. Go ahead, Gabriella?
I was going to share an example of a piece of legislation currently in our state legislature. It is House Bill 72, which would create a protection for survivors of all kinds of violence to break a lease if they need to. And what's important in that conversation, tying it back to our work, is why would a survivor of sexual assault, of sexual violence need that protection, and providing those examples. So for maybe the person that is harming you is your landlord, and you need to be able to get out of that lease. Maybe the assault happened where you are living and you no longer feel safe there. You don't want to be reminded of it. So you want to be able to break your lease. Or, you know, if it was a child and they don't feel safe and they run away, they're more prone to trafficking then, right? And so making sure we show up, to Yolanda's point, in those spaces and explaining how can this support a survivor.
Well, you know, there is just so many facets to this. It is truly, truly a complex. Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey. You have to unmute though, so we can hear you. We can't hear you. Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm trying to see if I can send you a note, but yeah, I can't unmute you, I don't think.
How's
Okay,
that?
that's
Yes.
it.
All right,
Okay.
good. My low-tech self. Uh, I saw a news story the other day. It did not involve sexual assault, but the story was that this individual had committed some crime or other and had been in prison and had his sentence commuted by President Biden right before he left. Well, within a matter of a month or two, he did it again and he was back in prison. So my question is, how is there a way to keep track of people who do these things so that they will not be in a position to do them again?
So we work with our partners. So it's a large gamut of sexual violence prevention, right? We focus more on survivors and victims of crime, and where we work with our partners who work with those who cause harm. And I'm thinking of the ATSA, which is the Association for Treatment of Sexual Abuse, something like that. I'll make sure you have what ATSA stands for. But so we have our partners that we work with to make sure what is happening as a whole and in states, to be able to work with our say our communities, but our law enforcement on what are those spaces around accountability. So we don't have
Right.
all the answers. That's why we have to work with our partners that's their jam. Like that's where they start out in this space. So our national arm has had a 20-something year partnership with ATSA, where we talk about how do we work in a unified space to be able to create these accountability spaces and be able to inform law enforcement, inform communities of best practices in this space. And I thought you were
Got
going
it.
to be talking about another case, Jeff. As soon as you started talking, I was like, oh, I wonder if it's the one I read. And I'm not familiar with the one that you're talking about, but that's the reason why we work with partners that help to inform what's the best practice for accountability. And obviously that wasn't the best practice.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, and there's another one here where even one of the January 6th people who were pardoned ended up being charged with molesting a minor. So it is an issue that needs to be kept track of for sure. But I will say this, as I was about to say, it's such a complex issue. I think the most important message we can give to people in April is ask the questions. We are not experts in this field, but we definitely need to know more about what we can do to prevent and to support people who have been victims. So maybe this is the theme for this month, for April. Ask because you need to know. So
Yeah.
very good. If is there anything else that you think pressing or any other pressing questions? If not, I'll let them just end with some closing comments, and we will certainly write an editorial on this for April. No other questions? Well, I'll leave you ladies with the last word.
Yeah, I put in the chat, it's the Association for the Treatment and Prevention of Sexual Abuse. Just wanted to make sure I said our partner's name the right way because I'm so used to saying acronyms. And I'll just piggyback off of what Joyce said. You know, we've been here and supported by centers to do the work that is needed across Pennsylvania and nationally for 50 years. And what we need is the support of our community members. That's our everyday folks. That's our corporations, our organizations to support prevention of sexual violence. And all that means supporting our advocates, with talking about it, supporting us financially, all of those different spaces. And that's what it means when we say together we act, united we change. Because if you're of my age or older, you absolutely have seen the progression of how things have changed. And that's because we used our voice and we were actionable out here, and we need to continue to do that. So as much as I thank my community for being here, we also continue to push our community to keep doing the work. Beautiful. And see you on April 30th. Okay. April 30th, April 30th, April 30th. Get your tickets.
Gabriella.
I always like to tie back to our mission, united to end sexual abuse, assault, and harassment. We are here to do that. That's our mission. We would love to accomplish that mission, and move, and support anyone in this space, and know that we're not going away, and that we're here in our community. Ask us questions, ask us for help. That's our job.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you very much for taking time to make our community aware of this important issue. And good luck. We'll be urging our community to support your very worthy efforts. So goodbye. Thank you all. Thanks to our editorial board for being here.
Thank you.